Hey y'all, today we are going to continue talking about how angles, segments, and circles make angles and arcs and how they interact in those relationships. And so up until this point, we have talked about having a vertex at the center of the circle. We have talked about having a vertex on the circle. And then we've talked about having a vertex of an angle inside the circle but not at the center. So our last place where we can have a vertex, where we can have segments intersect and create angles and arcs, is if those segments have a vertex that exists outside of the circle. And there are a few ways that that can happen. And in this first way, we have what we call two secant segments. These segments are called secant segments. They intersect the circle in two places. So you can see that this secant segment intersects at L and M, and this secant segment intersects at J and E. They touch the circle twice. And then those two secant segments intersect here at point K and create an angle. This angle right here. And so typically what we've had is one arc intercepted by an angle, but in this case we have two arcs. So if we consider these two secant segments sort of like, this might look a little silly, but if we make it look like it is some sort of creature, maybe a crocodile, that's eating part of the circle, you can see that it's eating this arc right here, and it's also eating this other arc right here. Sorry, it's a little sloppy, but you get the idea. And so those are the two arcs that are going to interact and have a relationship with this angle formed. And so right now we want to find that missing angle. And so the relationship here, much like in the last one where we had a vertex inside the circle but not at the center, we're going to double our angle. So we're going to multiply our angle by 2. And then what we get is we get a big arc and a small arc. This arc over here is always going to be the bigger one. It might not always be a lot bigger, but it's definitely going to be the bigger one. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to take our big arc, and I'm going to do it this way, big with an arc on the top, and I'm going to subtract from it our small arc, small arc. I'm just going to use that arc symbol to represent an arc. If you want to use the angle symbol instead of ang, that's fine. Do whatever works for you, whatever helps you have this relationship and remember how to use it. And so in this case, my angle is that question mark. That's what I'm looking for. So I'm going to substitute that. My bigger arc here is at 155. And my smaller arc that this creature is eating is 47. So now I have an equation I can solve, and I can find my missing angle using this relationship that exists when two secants intersect outside of a circle. I can do this subtraction here, 155 minus 47. My brain's a little foggy, so I had to take a second to think about that. There's no shame in using Desmos, using the tool that's provided to you if you need to. I'm going to divide both sides by 2 here to cancel out that 2. And I'm going to find out that my angle is 54 degrees. So the other way we get this same relationship, it's going to be the same relationship. It looks a little different. We have one secant segment that intersects the circle twice. And then we have a tangent segment that intersects the circle one time. So this one is a tangent, the other one is a secant like we just had. But the relationship is the same. We still are getting this vertex K that's outside of my circle. So this angle that exists outside of the circle formed by these two segments. And then we get the creature again, whatever you want to call it, a monster, a crocodile, that's eating these two segments. We have a bigger one, and we have a smaller one. And this one over here is always going to be the bigger one, the one that's not necessarily being eaten just yet. And our relationship is the same as it was before. We take our angle, multiply it by 2, and that should be equal to my big arc minus my small arc. And so if I write the relationship and I make sure I know which pieces I need, I can just substitute that information. I can substitute 39 in for my angle. My big arc is 156, and my smaller arc is what we're looking for. So the big deal here is to make sure we remember we're subtracting. So that's different from the last lesson. In the last lesson, the relationship had some addition. In this one, we are subtracting the big minus the small. So it's very important that we subtract the right way. The big one comes first. We're subtracting the big arc minus the small arc. So now we can do some solving. I'm going to multiply 39 by 2 and get 78. You solve your way. Your way might be different than mine. That's totally fine. My way is not better. It's just the way I do it. I'm going to move the 156 over here. When I switch its side of the equal sign, I'm going to switch its sign. So that's positive. It's going to become negative. 78 is positive, so I put a little plus there. It's important to know that that minus belongs with the question mark. So that minus is going to stay with the question mark. That's going to save you a problem in the end when you have a negative answer that you don't think is right. I could do negative 156 minus 78, and I get negative 78. And then since both of these sides are negative, I can change their signs to be positive, and I can find that my missing arc is 78 degrees. So I want you to use those two examples. I want you to use the relationship we just discussed, and I want you to find this missing arc, and make sure you put your answer in the answer box that pops up. So the last way we're going to see a vertex that exists outside of a circle is when we have two tangents. These two segments are tangents because they touch the circle only one time each. But they still have this vertex that exists outside the circle because there's an angle outside the circle formed by these two tangents. And now this looks a little different, but we do have two arcs that this thing is trying to eat. So my creature is still trying to eat a couple arcs. We have a bigger arc over here, and we have a smaller arc over here. And so we could still use this relationship that if we multiply our angle by 2, we can take our big arc and subtract our small arc, and those two sides should be equal. Sometimes that makes things tricky in this situation. And so there is a special relationship that also exists here. And that relationship is that my angle and my small arc will always add to 180 degrees. Be careful not calling these two things supplementary because they're not, because supplementary refers to two angles. But when we have this scenario, just for this one special scenario where we have two tangent segments, that angle formed outside and that small arc that that creature is eating will always add to 180 degrees. So we could use either of these two relationships and we could find the measure of our angle here. I'm going to do this new one just to show you how it works. I can replace my angle with question mark. My small arc here is 130. And now I have a one-step equation to solve. You solve it your way as long as it works every time. I'm going to move that 130 over there. And it's beginning to become negative 130 because it's switched signs when it switched sides. And I'm going to find that my angle is 50 degrees. And so if we wanted to use this original relationship that we used in the other scenarios, we could, but we would have to figure out how big this is. Well, the whole circle's 360, and this part is 130. So I can find out how big that arc is by doing 360 minus 130. and I could get 230. And so I could plug in 230 for my big arc and 130 for my small arc. I could do that subtraction and get 100. So I would get 2 times my angle equals 100. I could divide both sides by 2 and get my angle to be 50. And I get the same answer. Sorry, that would be question mark equals 50. I get the same answer. I'm just saying that sometimes this first one in this specific picture can become a little tricky. So just know it's good to have this up your sleeve, this other relationship that exists. And so when I do my next example, I'm going to use this other relationship. So I have my angle formed by my two tangents. I have my small arc, and I have my big arc. And I am going to have to do a little extra work here, but that's okay. It's still good to know this relationship to avoid a little trickiness in the future. My angle in this scenario, only this one where I have two tangents, plus my small arc, should be equal to 180. My big arc here is 246, so I can find my small arc by doing 360 minus 246. Subtract away this big arc from the whole circle, and it'll tell me how big this smaller arc is. And so that is 114. And so now I can plug in what I know. My angle is question mark. It's what I'm looking for. My smaller arc is 114 degrees. Again, solve this how you are good at solving it. My way to solve it is to just move that over here and change its sign. And then I can clean up this side by doing some subtraction and get my angle to be 66 degrees. So again, you could have used the original relationship, 2 times the angle equals big arc minus small arc. That will totally work here. Again, that just gets a little tricky down the line when we make these a little more complicated. And so this new special relationship, just for this type of picture, is helpful. So go ahead and use your relationship of choice here for this one. I would tend to use angle plus small arc equals 180. And make sure you put your answer for the missing angle in the answer box that pops up. If you need help, as always, ask us. So I did make a bit of a mistake here, and I put way too many problems, more problems here at the end than I wanted to. So I'm going to select a couple for you to solve. I'm going to want you to solve number 1 and number 3. So when the question box pops up, make sure that you put your answer to those questions in there. And I want you to do number 5 here, just number 5. So when the question box pops up, make sure you put your answer in there for number 5. As ever, if you need any help, please do ask one of us. We're glad to help you. Take your time, and good luck.